Folks, may I have your attention, please? I'm going to do some quick introductions and then let you enjoy your main course, which I hope they'll bring out pretty quickly. And then we'll start the program. Is this working? Yeah. All right. I'm Dave Barron. I helped start ICCF a long time ago, for that matter, the caucuses way back. Every now and then they invite me back. Usually they have me out trying to pay the bills. Hey, Randy. They try to keep me out of politics if possible. Like my old friend Robin Talon over here. Robin's a congressman from South Carolina, like me. We were on the opposite sides of the aisle back then, but
we're coming together, David.
Yeah, not that much difference between anybody in South Carolina and anybody else, I don't think. I also want to introduce Chris Lachevsky. Chris is a great supporter of ours. Chris is chairman of the National Fisheries Institute, which is the owners group, but he's also the man behind the development of the International Seafood Sustainability Foundation, ISSF, which is a partnership between WWF and the U.S. government, supported by AID, and Bumblebee. He's CEO of Bumblebee. I need to mention Bumblebee. Bumblebee's a great partner of ours, and Chris is very hands-on in trying to help policymakers here in Washington understand some of the issues confronting us in the oceans. We've got a lot of great oceans partners here today. We won't introduce all of them, but I wanted to pre-introduce three that will be speaking today. But first, I looked at the list of people that were going to be here today. I know almost none of the congressional staff here, but I know about half of your bosses. I actually know the parents of some of your bosses, literally, at least two people on the list. But this all happened as a little bit of an accident, but a group of congressmen got together many years ago to help push some great conservation initiatives and realize the possibilities, and they formed the International Conservation Caucus. It has been responsible for some novel new approaches. Ultimately, the caucus and this foundation, which was created to support it as a secretariat and to bring about a collaboration to form a brain trust, is that we think that good natural resource management is fundamental to U.S. interest, U.S. foreign policy and U.S. investment policy, but also essential in U.S. Aid programs. There's a tremendous nexus between agriculture, forest, and oceans, and other key areas of interest to us as a government, as a nation, a people. But we hear a lot about sustainability. What's essential is that people in the developing world, where we focus so much of our energies, understand the benefit of their natural resources. But if they can treat those natural resources as an annuity from which they extract an annual return, but without compromising the corpus, then future generations can benefit from that as well. So we are promoting investment as much as we are anything else. We think we need more protein out of our seas. We think we need more fiber out of our forest. But we have to protect the foundations, or there's no way we're going to feed the future. There are 7 billion people in the world today. 1 billion of them go to bed hungry every night now. What are we going to do when we have 9 or 10 billion people in the world? More and more pressure on a finite amount of natural resources. So it's a challenge, and it's something that we have to come together to find solutions to. This is not right or left or D or R. This is something that we owe it to the nations of the world to lead.
I kind of feel bad speaking when I haven't seen the presentations. And again, we have a great reputation with the environmental community, but we don't always see eye to eye. And when I see some of these statistics already, I can tell you that we definitely don't see eye to eye in terms of mislabeling at 56%, et cetera. That being said, again, my role as chair of the National Fisheries Institute, we are actually fully supportive of trying to get proper labeling. And I know we've had a couple of our members, for instance, get accused of improper labeling, when quite often most of the labeling issues we see are in restaurants, where again, restaurants have a pre-printed menu, and when they decide to change species, they're not necessarily updating the menu for the consumer. Again, we're fully supportive of legislation that would reduce and eliminate labeling fraud. There's a lot of it that goes in. We're fully supportive of traceability, and I think you'll find that virtually all of the major seafood companies in North America today have 100% traceability. I mean, it's not environmentalism, it's not sustainability, it's food safety. If you take a can of bumblebee tuna, give me the code on the can, I'll tell you exactly what boat the fish was caught and frozen on. I mean, it's that simple. So again, there is very good traceability. For most companies, recognize that 85% of the seafood eaten in this country is imported. So again, there is good traceability from the larger companies. That being said, like any industry, there are some bad players out there. And so again, without having seen exactly what the presentations are going to be from the environmental and the traceability group, I think you'll find the seafood industry is very supportive of legislation for IUU. There's a couple of bills out there right now. Port state measures, IUU, fish fraud, and proper labeling are, again, all things that the industry can accept and support as long as they're done responsibly and fairly. And I think you'll find that, again, National Fisheries Institute as a leader has probably spoken to a lot of the congressional staffs on these issues, and hopefully we'll see some real progress. Not that we're seeing much progress out of Congress these days, but I think you'll see that industry pushes. Our issues are not, they're not partisan issues. They're not Democrat, they're not Republican. They're good business. Business supports a lot of the legislation that's out there on sustainability, combating IUU, furthering traceability, proper labeling. That's good for business. And so we sometimes have a real hard time understanding why we can't push these bills forward when, again, for Republicans, it's good business. For Democrats, it's sustainability. We have a win-win, and we still don't make any progress. So anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to make a couple comments. I wish you were eating some bumblebee tuna for lunch, but there's always tomorrow. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I guess we're running a little behind, so I'm going to get started. Hello, everyone. I guess we're running a little bit behind, so we're going to get started with the presentation now. I'd love to thank the Foundation for this briefing on an important topic to Oceana, which is seafood fraud and traceability. I hope that Chris, once he hears my presentation, will understand what our figures are and will be supportive of the work that Oceana's done. I'm the campaign director, Beth Lowell at Oceana. We're an international ocean conservation organization. We have offices based here in the U.S., our headquarters, as well as in Central and South America and over in Europe. I'm the director of our Stop Seafood Fraud campaign. Seafood fraud is any time that seafood's been misrepresented, whether it's too much ice in packaging, falsifying some documents, or we focused on species substitution and really focused in on mislabeling. It's an issue for a number of reasons. It can rip you off, where customers are paying think they're getting a higher value fish and they're actually getting a lower cost fish. It can have some health impacts if you're trying to avoid a fish for a certain reason, whether you have allergies or trying to avoid a higher mercury fish, as well as hurt our oceans, where some illegally caught fish can be laundered into the U.S. market. So Oceana started to work on our campaign in about 2011 with the main goal to ensure that the seafood sold in the U.S. is safe, legally caught, and honestly labeled. We had read a bunch of newspaper articles and scientific reports on mislabeling of seafood, and they'd been, back to the early 80s and even before. So we were wondering what the current state of seafood mislabeling was in the U.S. So we decided to test some seafood ourselves. We went first to Boston, where we it's more of a trial study for us to see if we could actually take the fish, purchase it from a supermarket, preserve it in a way that it didn't rot before it got to the lab, find a lab that could do DNA analysis to verify the identity of this fish. So we went to Boston and tested about 100 samples just from supermarkets, and we found 18% of the seafood that we tested was mislabeled. And by mislabeled, we're using the species name and whether it's following the FDA seafood list, which guides how seafood can be labeled in the U.S. So and we found 18%, it was just supermarkets. The Boston Globe also did a study of mislabeling in Boston, and they went beyond to restaurants and as well as sushi bars, and they found 48% of the seafood that they tested was mislabeled. To be fair, we focused on commonly mislabeled species, where you got a red snapper, wild salmon, Atlantic cod. So this is not a percentage of all the seafood sold in the United States, but it's all the seafood that we tested. And so this is just a slide from one of our report that we released back in February, where that actually was clearly stated, where it's not on this slide. So then our next place we went to was the West Coast. And we wanted to expand like the Boston Globe did to restaurants and sushi bars as well. We tested about 100 samples again, a third from grocery stores, a third from sushi bars, and a third from restaurants, and we found 52% of the seafood that we sampled in California was mislabeled. So then we actually thought we were going to get a success story, and we went to Florida. Florida has some pretty strong state regulations and laws on mislabeling of seafood, and they've done a lot of enforcement on seafood. And while it wasn't as high as LA, we still found 38% of the seafood that we tested was mislabeled. So then we expanded and wanted to know sort of let's try areas that aren't coastal states, so and also are coastal states. So we did Seattle and Portland and San Francisco Bay Area, Denver, Colorado, Austin and Houston, Texas, Kansas City, Chicago, and DC. And basically everywhere we looked, we found mislabeled seafood. Overall, it was 3% of our 1,200 samples from across the country. We tested in 674 retail venues. Breaking it down by retail venues, the sushi restaurants were the worst offenders overall. I think some of it might be a translation issue, but some of it was clearly, tilapia and red snapper was a lot of substitution in sushi venues. 74% of our sushi samples were mislabeled according to the FDA guidelines. 38% of our restaurant samples and 18% of our grocery store samples. Now, our grocery store samples were mainly from the seafood counters and from seafood in bags in the freezer. So some of our most shocking substitutions was we found it was really hard to find a red snapper. We tested 120 different fish across the U.S. that were labeled as red snapper, and only 7 were actually red snapper. Which, if you're a red snapper fisherman, we've worked with some red snapper fishermen that are pretty upset that the market's flooded with product that's not their own, and if the demand for red snapper is so high, they should be getting a lot more money for their fish than they're getting right now. We also, in DC, some local DC facts, 26% of our DC seafood we sampled was mislabeled. Every snapper sample we tested was mislabeled, and every sushi venue sold mislabeled fish, and that's from low end to high end. One thing for snapper is only one species of fish can be called red snapper, but about more than 40 can be called snapper. So our snapper mislabeling, we found them in both categories, but obviously the red snapper was the highest. Also, we found fish that are on, the FDA has very few species that it advises sensitive populations to not consume at all because of its high levels of mercury. There's only 4 of those, and we found substitution in those species as well. So for pregnant women are supposed to avoid these fish altogether. We found king mackerel, which is one of those fish, sold as grouper in Florida. And then we found tilefish sold as halibut and red snapper in a grocery store in New York City. So, our fish travel a very complex path from the boat to your plate. Sometimes it crosses ocean basins for processing and then comes back to the U.S. And every step in that supply chain gives the opportunity for this bait and switch to happen. We think the solution to this problem, seafood fraud, let me hit the screen, is more information. Taking the information that the fishermen already have when they catch the fish and they're reporting when they land it, and have that information follow the fish through the supply chain. One, will give more confidence to consumers when they're buying seafood. It will allow regulators to do more risk-based assessments, seeing that information flow. By having it more transparent, you can also verify the species identity throughout the supply chain. So we think traceability is the way to ensure that the seafood sold in the U.S. is safe, legally caught, and honestly labeled. There are great programs and companies across the country that already have traceability put to work. They already have it in their business model, showing that it's doable, and it helps the companies as well as seafood businesses. We're going to hear about some traceability programs later in the program. But the problem is, well, we have these people that are honest seafood businesses, which is the majority of the fishing industry. We also clearly have some fraudsters at work in the supply chain, and it's really, we feel like it's unfair to the businesses that are doing the right thing, that they are subjected to seafood mislabeling at such a high level. I mean, although we were targeting commonly swapped species, to have a third of the samples that we tested mislabeled was more than even we thought that we'd find. So overall, I just want to thank you all for coming to this briefing today. We think seafood fraud is a problem in the U.S., but it's something that definitely can be fixed with real solutions that are already in place for much of the industry, and it's time to bring all of the rest of the industry up to the same level of what's happening. So, and again, we can ensure that the seafood sold in the U.S. is safe and legally caught and honestly labeled. So, thanks.
Thanks a lot, Beth, for your presentation. My name's Eric Enno Tamm, so I'm with one of the seafood traceability solutions out on the market. The seafood industry, as Beth pointed out, is pretty complicated, it's pretty complex, and that's made it really prone to a lot of seafood fraud and mislabeling. So I can understand if lawmakers are sort of scratching their heads around how do you actually put in laws in place to prevent this sort of fraud and mislabeling. There is some good news out there, though. The information technology revolution is finally showing up in the seafood industry. I think, over the past 5-10 years, there's a lot more online digital technology that's making traceability a lot more feasible for the industry. So what I'm going to do with my presentation today is actually walk you through how our system works. And by doing so, I'm hoping that you'll get to understand some of the challenges and complexity behind seafood traceability, but also what a workable solution is, because there are a lot of businesses that are actually putting in place online, digital, consumer-focused traceability systems to meet the sort of market failure that you see around mislabeling. The system I work for is called ThisFish, and it's a seafood traceability system that actually connects the actual harvester to the consumer. It's not just a seafood traceability system, though, because it marries material traceability with new online social media technology. I like to call it faceability, about putting a face on seafood. A lot of people call our system sort of Facebook for fishermen. The system was started in 2010 by EcoTrust Canada. It's a nonprofit based in Vancouver, and it was actually a group of fishermen that came to us that we've been working with that said, we want a traceability solution. We know that government regulators in the United States, Canada, and Europe are looking at putting in new rules, and we want to get ahead of the game. And then many of them saw actually market advantages for getting into traceability. So in building our system, we basically have 3 objectives. First is to build trust and authenticity in the supply chain. Second, to empower consumers to make more informed choices about the seafood they buy and eat. And then finally, actually reward fish harvesters and seafood businesses that are committed to sustainability, quality, and authenticity through traceability. So our system right now, we have about over 400 fishing vessels registered in the system, about 24 buyers, distributors, and processors. Canada's second largest retailer, Sobeys, is using our system to trace Canadian sourced product in their stores, and we have a regional retailer as well. There's about 40 different species in our system, about 10 from New England states, some from Atlantic Canada, and the rest from the Pacific Coast. And we're tracing product in Canada, the United States, and we have a small pilot operational also in the Netherlands. So the seafood supply chain is pretty complicated, and our system is flexible enough that we can handle whether it's a live product, live lobster, live crab, frozen at sea tuna, or all the varieties of fresh product and processed product. So the supply chain is very complicated, and we have to change coding and chain of custody processes to make sure we gather information about the products. Here's a couple examples. This is Brown Family Seafood, Captain Chris Brown and his 2 sons. They're in Point Judith, Rhode Island. That's an example of a very short supply chain. They're selling into local stores. There's a high level of trust. Captain Brown catches a fish, and his Sam actually delivers it to the restaurants. And they're using our system. Here's a much more complicated supply chain. MGM Properties in Las Vegas are using our system to trace quality, premium Nova Scotian lobsters. It's a very long, complicated supply chain. There's not a lot of trust in the supply chain, so they use our system to help build trust. And MGM is procuring all their lobsters with the traceability system. So I just wanted to run you through how the system works. Obviously, when fishermen go out and catch fish, it needs to be identified with a unique code. And often the code is put on some sort of tag or label, and all of you should have an example of a tag that you can actually trace. It's a demonstration tag on your table. And the tags can go on live lobster or fish tails, variation on frozen at sea product. For more complicated processed product, we have QR labels on wholesale cases. In some cases, we actually even put the codes right onto the consumer packages. For a Sobeys product, and this is for a custom processor based out of Vancouver. So once product's coded, data is uploaded online, sometimes by the fish harvester, sometimes by the processor, and all sorts of details about how it's caught, where it's caught, etc. As the fish travels the supply chain, other companies who handle it can also add themselves to the online supply chain. And then ultimately, when the fish ends up in a restaurant or into the hands of a consumer, you can actually take your mobile phone and trace the code at thisfish.info or go online to our website. So that's the sort of the front end. That's the stuff that you can actually see. But there's 2 other elements that are really key to making sure that our system operates. And the one is standards. So we have standards around data and chain of custody to ensure that people are getting consistent information. And then also validation. So we do auditing of the data that's put into our system to ensure it's credible and accurate. So that's the sort of 3 pillars of our system for the ThisFish system. Here's some examples. If you were actually to trace your fish, you can see the type of species, the fisherman that caught it, and the method for catching it. You can click open the boxes, learn a little bit more about the fish harvester. And you can click on a full profile. So the fisherman actually has like a Facebook profile on our system as well. And there's all sorts of details about how it's caught. The catch method, whether there's any eco ratings, Seafood Watch or MSC, shelf life, landing dates. And we also have nutritional information and tasting notes and more consumer-friendly information. So the point of our system is to build market confidence. The standards help to ensure that consumers receive the same information no matter the product, so they have a consistent experience. Our auditing ensures that it's accurate and credible information that's in the system. And then we're also a third party. So we're an independent third party information broker. I'm not really in the seafood business. I don't touch fish. I'm in the information business and ensuring that information is accurate and is high quality. But the other elements of our system is more around marketing. It's not just a one-way flow of information. The consumers see where the fisherman catches their fish. Every fisherman and seafood processor can log in this system and go to a dashboard, and they can actually see where in the world their fish is being traced. And actually, the consumers can send a note to their fish harvester and seafood business as well, and those comments from the consumers get shown on the dashboard. So it's feedback to the fishermen. And here's just a tag cloud of all the comments so far from consumers to fish harvesters. So many of them recognize the risk and hard work of the commercial fishing industry. And so, thank you is probably one of the most common things that people want to say to their fish harvester. And we're also working a lot on innovative marketing to connect consumers to their seafood. We do a lot of point of sale communication in the retailers to promote the actual fish harvesters. We've run like trace and win contests to encourage consumers to try this new thing. This week, we're setting up an iPad kiosk in a retail store. So there are a number of market advantages for traceability, and I just want to run through a few of them quickly. Accountability improves quality. When a fish harvester knows that their face is going to be on their product, they take better care of the product. And we hear a lot of processors say that the traceability improves quality in the marketplace. Trust and confidence, I've already talked about. Decommodification and differentiation. A salmon is not just a salmon. A salmon comes from a particular river. It's cleaned and harvested by a particular harvester. Fishermen want to differentiate themselves. They don't want to be in a commodity market. They look at more at the wine industry and the type of differentiation that happens there. Social media and social marketing, because of the online nature, there's lots of benefits for tweeting about your harvest and going online. So we provide a platform for that as well. Market intelligence, as I talked about. And the other thing is big data, where we have a huge volume of data that's inputted into our system. And it can be used to help provide industry benchmarks and performance for particular companies. But the other thing that's, I think, really important, especially for lawmakers, is big data and enforcement. If you're in DC and you use your Visa card at a gas station, and then 20 minutes later your Visa card is used in a gas station in New York City, what happens? Visa calls you right away, because they know their data it signifies that there's an alert, there's something wrong. And the same can happen in the seafood industry. As we compile a lot of data, we can see patterns and aberration in the data to identify if there's legal activity going on. So big data could really help enforcement, I think, hone in on where there's fraud in the seafood supply chain. So there are tangible benefits to our system around price premiums, improved product quality, more long-term exclusive contracts for those companies in the system. And there's also an intangible benefit to the system, and that's really generating pride in the commercial fishing industry. Most fishermen and even seafood processors never get direct consumer comments, and so our system is helping to really build pride in the industry. And here's one of the fish harvesters from Vancouver Island. And I was born and raised in the commercial fishing industry, and almost all the fishermen that we work with are 100% supportive of our system. The Fishermen's Association Newfoundland recently polled 500 fishermen and asked them, would you go into an online seafood traceability system? Only one failed to check the box to say yes. They were all almost unanimous in wanting to have a system like this in place. So, the information revolution has come to the seafood industry, and I think it's going to help to improve the industry's performance and cut back on fraud. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Eric, and thank you, Beth, and thank you, Dave, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. I'm Alex Miller with the Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission. I'm the staff economist, and the commission works on behalf of the states of the Gulf of Mexico from Florida to Texas. But what I want to talk to you about today is our new traceability program, Gulf Seafood Trace. And this was put into place after the oil disaster in the Gulf of Mexico to try to overcome some of the perceptions about Gulf seafood and try to drive the market back to Gulf seafood. And this program is funded by Congress, and the intent of Congress was just that, to try to improve the market and overcome the perceptions for Gulf seafood. But taking a step back, when we talk about seafood traceability, it's really about risk management because seafood supply chains are incredibly complex. So with our program with Gulf Seafood Trace, we're able to take out some of that complexity and connect the boat to the plate. So we're able to do it, it's working, and it's successful, and I'll show you that here in a second. And we're able to build off of systems that are already in place, such as the electronic trip ticket system at the dock when the catch comes in, as well as the internal business management systems that the seafood companies have. So a little bit about why traceability. I talked about a little bit of why we're doing it, but when we got going, we took a look at what's going on in the seafood industry and focused on these areas. So one was the quality and safety, and again, it gets back to risk management, be able to perform a recall in the case of a human health concern. It's also about risk management in terms of seafood fraud and mislabeling, and traceability can help with that. It's also about IUU and different regulations and legality and management. Seafood traceability can help overcome the challenges there, as well as the challenges we have with sustainability. Traceability can help with the chain of custody requirements that different sustainability certifications have. And then it's about marketing that Eric talked about, trying to differentiate the product and pull the product out of the commodity market. And we have a challenge with that in the Gulf of Mexico. So looking at the seafood supply chains, we've all mentioned that they're extremely complex. And they are. Information resides at different locations, different transformations and aggregations take place, different handoffs, multiple shipments become one finished product. So it's incredibly complex and challenging, and it's risky. So it's not only complex, but there's an incredible amount of data that, like Eric talked about, with this information increasing every day. So there's information from test results and certificates and invoices and labels and barcodes and certificates, every imaginable thing. But what happens is there's this big breakdown because the buyers are on the phones or the fax or the emails, and they're asking for all this information. So that's where the information about the product gets lost when you have this complexity going on in this massive amount of data. And then when that information gets to the consumer, it becomes very disjointed and disorganized and inconsistent. So that's where the breakdowns occur. So with our program in the Gulf of Mexico, we're able to overcome some of these challenges and the complexity. So this is our approach of the Gulf Seafood Trace program. We're able to take information that we have in sort of these different bubbles or silos at the harvest level and connect it to the dock. We're able to take the information we have at the dock and connect it to the processors and the distributors, and then connect it to the retailers and the restaurants to have that information flow through the system in a more efficient and straightforward manner. So that's the Gulf Seafood Trace program, connecting the supply chain in a straightforward way. So looking at the components of our program, we have three large components. One is an electronic traceability platform that's sort of the plumbing behind the system. And two, we have a data quality, data check that makes sure the information means something. You don't want to have garbage in and garbage out. And then there's a marketing module that's sort of the icing on the cake that allows us to tap into the rich information behind the scenes and share it with consumers. So taking a look at each one of those components, we'll start with the first one, the electronic traceability pipeline, and show you how the information gets from the boat to the plate. So it starts at the vessel, and by state and federal laws, the fishermen, the harvesters have to report their catch. So they do that through an electronic trip ticket system that goes into what we call in the Gulf of Mexico a Fisheries Information Network. So what we did, we built on the system that was already there for state and federal reporting and built in an interface, so all they have to do is click one button. They don't have to enter in new information. Click one button, and it goes to this traceability company we work with, Trace Register, and they have a cloud-based database system that information goes to, and then the other players in the supply chain could add information, the processors, the distributors, and then that information that's in that silo, if you will, can be shared with the retailers and be shared with the restaurants and ultimately the consumer. So here's a quick look at what it looks like inside that electronic trip ticket system, where they can click that one simple button and send it to Trace Register. So like I said, they don't have to enter it again. They click that button and it's in the system. So this is a look in the Trace Register system of what a buyer might see, a retailer, what have you. In this case, you can see the product came from the Panhandle of Florida and then was processed in Florida there, and then broken up and shipped to New York and shipped to Texas. A little bit about Trace Register. They're based in Seattle. They've been around since about 2006. They have about 1,000 seafood companies using their system around the world in 24 countries, and the major retailers are also using it. So moving on to the second component of the program, this data check and data verification. Again, we don't want the garbage in because we'll get the garbage out, right? So this is just one quick example of an actual retailer. And the amount of data is overwhelming. And in this example, they estimated just on the information about seafood that they're buying in 1 year, if you stacked it up, it would equal 16 floors of information. So how do you try to get your hands around this huge amount of information? It's only going to increase. So we realized this early on and worked with Trace Register to pioneer what I think is a pretty unique system. So what it does is we have algorithms and data checks that we set rules and look at inconsistencies and problems in the data. One might be, does the common name equal the species name? Does the area that you're claiming it came from at the dock, does it match the area you're claiming it came from at the processor or at the restaurant? Same thing with the species. If you're claiming it's one species at the dock and you change it to something else at the processor and then at the restaurant, it shows up in red flags, and what we work with is pass and fail. The pass being the green, the red being the fail. So we're able to act on these areas of risk, and this is for all data, not just one audit randomly in the middle of the year or something. So this could be used by enforcement or by auditors or whatever it might be for all the information. So then we move to the last component of the program, the marketing. And here, like I said, it's the icing on the cake. We're able to tap into this rich pipeline of information to do a variety of things, tell a story. This is a very innovative interface that enhances the credibility. And then there's a really sort of endless label here that you don't normally have on a seafood package at the store or on the menu. You can put videos and stories about the fishermen, and it goes on and on. It educates and informs, and it really elevates that confidence and trust that the consumers want to have. So this is a quick example of what one seafood company is doing. I think on the table there's a bag to pass around and take a look at it. They have, this company, Norton's Fish House, manages Emerald's brand for wild American shrimp, and they've really embraced the program with the traceability, and they have traceable shrimp in about 250 commissaries around the world. So we launched this program March 2012 at the Boston Seafood Show, and to date we have 59 seafood companies, and these are pretty big seafood companies, mostly processors that handle millions of pounds or hundreds of thousands of pounds, from Florida to Texas. And to date, we've had about 19 million or so pounds entered into the system. So I should note it's also a voluntary program, and we, the Commission, through Congress, are able to cover the cost for the program until the end of next year. So we've also partnered with a couple of different organizations in the Gulf of Mexico. Part of the congressional money that the Commission received also went to start the Gulf Seafood Marketing Coalition. So we've recently partnered with them for their retail and food service promotions, where behind the scenes they have the robust traceability to make sure what they're promoting in the store is actually from the Gulf of Mexico. We also have partnered with the Mississippi Restaurant Association. They received money from BP to do some marketing with shrimp. And we've partnered with them to have the traceability behind the scenes, again, to make sure it came from the Gulf of Mexico, because you don't want to promote something that didn't come from where you're saying it came from. So that's the Gulf Seafood Trace program. Again, like I said in the beginning, it's about risk. And we're here with this program, we're able to show it can be done, it is working, and we're building off of systems that are already in place. So thank you for your time and the opportunity, and be willing to take any questions with the other panelists.
One question.
Yes,
Please.
Congressman.
The gentleman that just spoke from the Gulf, as far as NOAA and their monitoring devices, is that been a big aid to your efforts for maybe the audit trail?
Yeah, we don't tap into the monitoring systems that are out there for this program. The only system we're tapping into is the electronic trip ticket system that's at the dock, and that's, again, at a voluntary level. So if they don't want to use it, they don't have to, but if they're in the program, they're able to do that. So yeah, and we're not tapping any type of monitoring database or anything.
Now, in your region, are you guys in a cat share program?
So the Commission has nothing to do with cat share programs. There are cat share programs in the Gulf of Mexico, but we don't oversee.
Right.
NOAA and
Right.
the councils oversee that program.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
With such a high percentage of the fish that's brought into the U.S. coming from elsewhere, regardless of where it's caught in the U.S. and processed elsewhere or caught elsewhere and coming into the U.S., how do these traceability systems ensure that there's not commingling or some infiltration of illegal or other product before it actually gets to the borders of the United States?
So our program doesn't deal with product from other parts of the world. But how it could work is that, and I didn't talk a lot about it, the trace register system works on lot-based system. Okay, so if you have a part of seafood that's from the United States and you have a part that's from another country, those two can come together and you can show that they came from this country in that country. But at the end of the day, and you can build in rules like we have in our data check and our algorithms to do a mass balance analysis and other simplified forms to make sure that what you're claiming is actually what's going on. If you say you have 1,000 pounds, well, you have to account for 500 here and where it came from, and 500 here where it came from.
Does that answer it? This is a work in progress. Other question? Oh, Jeanette. Yeah, Jeanette Lyman-Lukens.
I just had a real quick question. My impression is that a lot of the processors, fishing industries are very interested in engaging on traceability and these mislabeling issues. And my question was, has the restaurant industry been at all engaging or interested in being a partner on this?
We've actually done a lot of outreach to chefs and restaurant owners, and last year had a petition with over 500 chefs supporting traceability, required traceability in the supply chain, because they want to feel more confident about the seafood that they're serving to their customers. So we're redoing our efforts again to support traceability for this year, including some big names like Mario Batali, Jack Pepin, who does Jack and Julia show back in the day, and others. So, I think the restaurant industry itself, the restaurants that we've been working with are believe that traceability is key for them as well.
Actually could have stayed up there. I was going to ask, you mentioned
Beth.
Florida has very strong traceability and fish labeling requirements. What reactions have you had from any of the other states that you visited where they saw their numbers were
We've
shocking?
actually had a lot of great response from the states as well as NOAA and FDA. So we do not share publicly where we tested our seafood because the end person that's selling the food may not actually know that their seafood's mislabeled. There's a very complex supply chain, so it may have been mislabeled further up in the process, and they may actually not be aware that they're selling products. So we didn't want to call people out that may not know that they were serving mislabeled seafood or selling it. So we've worked with LA County Public Health, went in behind us and had a list of where we tested, and they went behind us and tested the same places and basically found their report was almost exactly the same as ours. So nothing had changed since we released our report to the press, and then they came back in and tested. So they've been doing their own enforcement actions in LA. We've also been in touch with folks in California and Pennsylvania and Massachusetts that we've, if a local agency or a state agency wants to know where we tested, they obviously can't use our data for enforcement actions or anything like that, but they'll help target where they look. So they can also go up further into a supply chain and figure out if, a bunch of places were buying from the same distributor or wholesaler as well. So.
One concern that both fishermen and processors seem to have before they start participating in these traceability programs is that it will be a lot of extra work and paperwork and sort of feel like more regulation even though it isn't. How has it worked with the dial-up into these voluntary traceability programs?
So, so far I've been quite surprised that the engagement of fish harvesters, a lot of them are in rural areas, particularly in Atlantic Canada, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland. So we haven't run into any problems yet, but I know that as we scale up our system, some of the very, very remote outports may not have dial-up. However, there are other solutions, including data being called in by telephone. A lot of the rural communities also, the supply chains are a lot slower. It takes a live lobster maybe a week or 2 weeks to get to the marketplace. So information just needs to get online before the product gets into the marketplace. So it doesn't have to be so much in real time. So there can be some time delays. But we haven't experienced any problems so far. But I know that there will be some challenges. But I think that there'll be some technology solutions and just some innovations that we'll adapt for our system.
Hi, this question is for the gentleman from Gulf Seafood Trace. And, you know, ThisFish may be able to chime in the first part of this question, but have you developed a long-term business model which will enable growth and sustainability once these congressionally allocated funds have dried up, as you mentioned, next year?
Right. So we hope that companies see the value and the opportunity and they'll want to keep going with it. But like I said, the funding does end in the next year. So at the moment, that would basically be the end of the program unless we have additional funding to keep it going. But like I said, this is really an opportunity for the businesses to try it out and see if this is something that's right for their business, and then they'd have to buy the components of the program to move forward. So.
Food industry, especially the seafood industry, are on very, very tight margins. So in building ThisFish, one of the ideas behind it was to build a sort of globally scalable traceability system, partly because the seafood industry is global. I mean, 80%, I think, of Canadian seafood exports come down to the United States. So we knew from right off we needed a scalable international system, but we also wanted it scalable so we can bring the marginal cost per user down, right? So our system will be financially feasible if we can scale it up. And that's what we're going to be doing over the next 3 years here. We have received some government funding in Canada, but most of our money comes from private charitable foundations who are interested in food technology and sustainability. So we have about 3 years to get ourselves up to a certain scale to make it financially feasible. So fish harvesters and businesses are paying a fee based on their usage of the system.
Last question? Anybody? Again, Beth, Eric, Alex, thank you all for being here. And thank all of you for being here. And if your boss isn't in the caucus, go sign him up. Let us know. Thanks. Cheers.